Dorothy Parker had been working in the maternity ward for several years and had never complained about her job. Despite all the challenges and difficulties, she considered it the best job ever. But what she loved the most was taking care of the newborn babies, dressing them, and helping with feedings if their mothers couldn't nurse. Dorothy had no children of her own, so she found happiness in caring for other women's babies. Together with her husband Larry, they had gone through numerous medical examinations and tests. Unfortunately, they were still never able to conceive, leaving them with a sense of regret and longing in their hearts. Dorothy suspected that she could be the cause of their infertility, and thus she was very, very sad every time the topic of children ever came up. At some point, the couple decided to adopt a child from an orphanage. Dorothy already started collecting the necessary documents when something strange happened at the maternity ward. It all started when an ambulance brought in a woman at a fairly advanced stage of pregnancy. Witnesses said that she started having contractions right on the street, which indicated her reluctance to come to the maternity ward in advance. The woman had tanned skin and wore rather eccentric clothes. Her name was Rosa, and she lived in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. Dorothy knew that the area was full of slums where people struggled to survive and had to literally fight for their existence. Rosa's condition was critical due to the fetus's improper position in the womb. Dorothy knew that a C-section might be the only option in such a difficult situation. Unfortunately, despite the doctor's professionalism, the operation was unsuccessful. Rosa had poor blood clotting, which led to serious complications. However, her newborn daughter was doing great. As if sensing what was going to happen, Rosa grabbed Dorothy by the hand and whispered, "I beg of you, please help me. You have to help me, ma'am. Don't leave my daughter without a mother. Take her and raise her." Dorothy was taken aback by Rosa's words. "What do you mean, take her and raise her? What are you talking about? You'll be fine." But there was no changing Rosa's mind. "I won't be fine, I can feel it. I have a gift, I can tell the future. I got it from my grandmother, but don't say no, please. You have to save my daughter, Nancy. In the corner there, you see, that's my purse. Please give everything that's inside to my daughter, okay?" Tears welled up in Dorothy's eyes. The young woman's words struck the most painful chords in her heart, making it tremble with pity. "Okay, I will help you. I can't promise much, but I will help," Dorothy said, her voice trembling. Rosa passed away an hour later. Still unable to believe what had happened, Dorothy stood by the crib of the newborn Nancy and couldn't stop herself from crying. Then she remembered about Rosa's purse. She nearly fainted when she opened it. There was a massive gold pendant inside and a sealed envelope without an inscription. At that moment, Dorothy realized that she couldn't break her promise to Rosa and vowed that she would indeed adopt little Nancy. This news shocked her work colleagues to the core. How can you adopt some random woman's child? It's not right. You don't even know who that woman was. Did she have any relatives? And who's the baby's father? Dorothy's friend, Kate, said. Dorothy was taken aback, but she didn't back down. She knew that Kate's perspective was influenced by her 3 children and loving husband waiting for her at home. Dorothy's own marriage, meanwhile, was going through a rough patch, as her husband really wanted to have children and she still couldn't get pregnant. Dorothy talked to her husband as soon as she got home after her shift. To her surprise, Larry wasn't thrilled with the idea. Adopt some unknown woman's child? But why? What if her relatives come back and claim their rights? They could even take us to court. Dear, don't worry about it, dear. Nancy is an orphan and she has no relatives. Dorothy hastened to reply. Larry loved his wife and didn't want to hurt her with a refusal or mistrust. Frankly speaking, there was nothing wrong with adopting the little girl. Larry approached his wife and hugged her, indicating his agreement. Now, all they had to do was get their documents in order and prepare a room for Nancy. It took less than 3 weeks, after which Larry and Dorothy finally became parents. Time flew by, filling the lives of the new parents with various pleasant moments related to raising their child. Nancy was growing up a smart and obedient girl, hardly causing the parents any trouble. From an early age, she wore the golden pendant passed down to her by her mother. No one knew who it used to belong to or what its story was. During her stay at the maternity ward, Rosa didn't look rich, and the fact that she owned such an expensive item seemed rather strange. As for the sealed envelope, the couple decided not to open it, for now. Larry believed that there was nothing important in it and didn't want to read someone else's letters. But there was another thing that disturbed the couple and kept them on edge. Right after Larry and Dorothy adopted little Nancy, strange things started happening around their house. They would spot shabbily dressed people trying to peek through the fence and open the door. Larry even contacted the police several times, but it was all in vain. From a legal standpoint, there was nothing wrong. The couple felt that it was somehow connected to Nancy, whose roots they knew nothing about. A few days later, Larry decided to sell the house. Thankfully, after they moved to the new neighborhood, the harassment stopped and the strange people disappeared as suddenly as they appeared. Several years had passed. During that time, Dorothy never once regretted having adopted Nancy. By that time, Nancy finished school. She already knew she wanted to follow in her mother's footsteps and become a nurse. The fact that she was adopted was never hidden from Nancy, since Larry and Dorothy didn't want to lie to their daughter. Acknowledging Nancy's roots was challenging, especially considering her appearance and taste in clothes. "Sweetheart, maybe you should reconsider and choose a different occupation. Medicine is a difficult field. You'll have to face so much human pain and suffering, trust me. There's little pleasure in it," Dorothy said, involuntarily recalling the day Rosa passed away. "No, Mom, I want to be just like you. I've seen you in your scrub since I was little, and I always liked medical books. Do you really think that I could choose any other profession?" Nancy objected. At that moment, Dorothy understood that her daughter had already made her choice, and changing her mind would be impossible. Nancy proved to be a talented student and graduated from nursing school with honors. She started working at a hospice for the elderly. There, she first encountered manifestations of human cruelty. The relatives of the elderly would often send them to the hospices to spare themselves the trouble associated with looking after their frail relatives. "I don't know, how can they be so cruel? So many people bring their own parents here. Can't they find some time to take care of them?" Nancy exclaimed genuinely. Her colleagues could only shrug, not knowing the answer to that question. One day, an elderly man with silver hair and a lush beard was admitted into the hospice. The new resident's name was Charles Foster, and he had the same kind of dark skin as Nancy did. As fate would have it, Nancy was the one responsible for processing the documents of this elderly man. "We share the same blood, my dear," the old man said, squinting slightly. Nancy smiled, not entirely understanding what the man meant. "I can feel it. You're one of us. You just haven't realized it yet. Our women can tell the future. It's a special gift," the man continued. Nancy turned the conversation into a joke, but then Charles noticed the gold pendant hanging around her neck. Suddenly, the man turned pale and clutched his chest, gasping for air as if a fish tossed ashore. "What's wrong, Mr. Foster? Are you feeling unwell? Should I call the doctor? Please tell me, don't stay silent," Nancy pleaded. "Rosa, my God, that's my daughter Rosa's pendant," the old man wheezed with his toothless mouth. At first, Nancy didn't fully grasp what had happened, so she didn't take the old patient's words seriously. She thought it was dementia speaking, which many elderly people were suffering from. But when the old man regained his composure and calmed down a bit, he pointed to the pendant again and started crying. It took Nancy about half an hour to get Mr. Foster to finally give a coherent explanation of what had happened. As it turned out, 23 years ago, his only daughter Rosa ran away from home. The young woman did it deliberately, hoping to avoid a marriage arranged by her parents. She didn't love the man her father had chosen for her and decided to leave home and cut ties with her family. However, her new life didn't go well. She met a passing driver from Texas and fell deeply in love with him. She only came to her senses when she realized she was pregnant. Her boyfriend immediately abandoned her and returned to Texas, where he already had a family of his own. At some point, the young woman even considered returning home, but she managed to resist the temptation, intending to raise her child alone. Rosa knew that if she returned pregnant and without a husband, she would bring shame upon her family for generations to come. Throughout her life, Rosa always wore a golden pendant passed down to her from her maternal great-grandmother. Rumor had it that this item was a gift to their family from none other than Abraham Lincoln himself. However, nobody could definitively say whether this was true or not. It was this pendant that was now owned by Nancy, a woman who had never met her biological mother. Of course, Charles tried to find his daughter and enlisted the help of many of his relatives. In a way, there was an ongoing search operation for Nancy. It was Charles's relatives who tried to trace the whereabouts of his daughter Rosa, peering through the windows of the young couple's house. By that time, Charles already knew that his daughter was dead and wanted to at least get back his granddaughter. But everything turned out differently. The most interesting part was that inside the sealed envelope found in the late Rosa's purse, there was a photograph of her father, Charles. When she fled from home, Rosa took it as a memento, fully aware that she would never return to her family. And now, as Charles looked at his granddaughter, he couldn't help but cry. But those weren't tears of sorrow. He was proud to learn that his granddaughter had received a good education and became a nurse. It was only in his old age that Charles understood that he couldn't forcibly control the destinies of his children, depriving them of the opportunity to choose how to live their lives. If it weren't for the unfortunate situation with the wedding, Rosa would have never run away from home and lived such a short and joyless life. Hugging his granddaughter, Charles silently thanked the heavens for their help and let out a quiet sob. As he looked at Nancy, the old man was sure that his late daughter Rosa was watching over them from the heights of heaven, rejoicing at the reunion of their ancient lineage.